Falls on January 30th. We have everyone here. We're just waiting on Mayor Panko to sign in, but he's be with us in a moment momentarily. There he is right now. I'm your chair for tonight, Councillor Peter McKenna, and I'll start with the land acknowledgements. On January 30th, we acknowledged that this sacred land on which Smith Falls is now located has been the site of human activity for 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We're grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here tonight. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We're mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. Thank you. We'll just, if it's okay with council, we'll just modify the agenda slightly. I'm going to move 8.5, which is the vaccination policy, into the slot at 8.2, and then we'll adjust the numbers going forward. With that change, are there any other changes that council wishes to make to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll just seek a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Quinn, seconded by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. We have any disclosure of monetary interest tonight? Okay, Councillor Miller, why don't you start us off?
Thank you. I need to declare a conflict with the second draft of the budget report. I'm not sure which agenda item it is now. I'm employed by one of the applicants. I would also ask, Mr. Chair, if we could separate the decision on community grants from the second draft budget discussions so that I can continue to participate in the decisions without the conflict of the grant piece.
Yes, Councillor Miller, and you've done this consistently in the past, and I think we pulled that out and did deal with it separately, so it shouldn't really be an issue for you or us tonight. So thank you, and I'll be watching carefully if we slip one way or the other. And Councillor Robinson.
When we get to the police portion of the budget discussion, I will have to declare a conflict due to my daughter-in-law being the deputy chief. And I would also ask that if we could separate the police budget, that I can participate in the rest of it.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson, and you've been consistent on doing this. And we have, in the past recent meetings, pulled that out and have dealt with it separately. It shouldn't be an issue tonight. Councillor Brennan, did you want to add anything? No, you're just waving. Okay. So with those two duly noted potential, well, you have monetary interest in both of those items, we'll move ahead. There are no delegations. We have I'll be seeking a motion that the minutes of the December 12th, 2022 and January 9th, 2023 committee meeting will be received and filed. And that's moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Miller. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. I don't believe we have any director's reports.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, CM Morrison. It's nice to see you. I didn't introduce you at the start, but there you are. We have one correspondence item. It's a letter from Minister Clark from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And he's referencing in his letter the government's goal of building 1.5 million houses over the next 10 years and some of the internal changes to the building code to make that happen. Does anybody want to pull that out, discuss that letter, or we'll just note that we've received it? I'm not seeing anybody interested in pulling it out, so we received it. And it's part of the budget package if any of the member of the public would like to read it. It's part of the, meeting package. Okay, we have no in-camera issues, and moving right along to 8.1. Director Costello is going to speak with us regarding the update to our property standards and yard bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this has been on council's agenda for about a year now, looking to update our current property standards bylaw and its kind of companion piece, the yards bylaw. So when we started down this road, we were looking at addressing 5 things. We were looking at allowing naturalized yards within town limits. We were looking at addressing the quality of housing, as well as the composition of the Property Standards Committee, which we have now incorporated into our Planning Advisory Committee, and we've appointed membership to that. We were looking at coordination with our yards bylaw, as well as assisting with some guidelines or something for both our bylaw enforcement officers as well as the public at large to use when we implement these changes. So to that end, we've used Dillon Consulting. Rory is here with us this evening and will do a presentation for council on the 2 bylaws. He has added the naturalized yards provisions into our yards bylaw and cleaned up our property standards bylaw to meet current standards. So with that, Rory, I think if you want to take over, Rory's done a presentation and is free to take questions that any of you may have afterwards. So Rory, I'll pass it on to you to introduce your team and make your presentation.
Thanks very much, Carrie. And good evening to the chair and the mayor and members of council and members of the community that are in attendance this evening. I'm joined by Sydney Bailey and another member of our team, and pleased to share with you the culmination of the work on the update to the property standards bylaw and the yard bylaw. As mentioned, I do have a very brief presentation, and Sydney is going to get us started, and then I will come in with a bit more detail on the heels of that. So perhaps, Sydney, if you can confirm that's up on the screen and you can see that.
Perfect. Thank you
Yes.
so much, Rory.
All right, and then let's continue forward. Sydney, it's all yours.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. So here's an outline of our presentation that we have for you this evening. I am a professional planner at Dillon Consulting, joined here by Rory Rakesh, who is a project manager on the project, as well as Justine Giacola, who is a planner, and Martina and Angel, who has provided landscape professional consulting on the project as well. Next slide, please. Perfect. So our team has been looking at a fulsome review of the property standards within the town of Smith Falls to extend the emerging trend of naturalized yards, which has popularized in the recent coming years. These 2 objectives have led to a refresh of the property standards bylaw, which has been last amended in 2015. Next slide, please. The naturalization of yards has become a popular alternative to manicured lawns due to the environmental incentives of supporting pollinators and biodiversity. The inclusion of a yard bylaw has been introduced to support naturalized alternatives while creating standards for the regular upkeep of yards. Next slide, Rory, please. The property standards bylaw, which has previously been regulated by the Building Code Act, has now been adopted by municipalities for a widespread standard of maintenance issues. This has been extended to tenant property maintenance, which often sits in the extended delays of the landlord tenancy board. And reviews a wide range of property maintenance issues that Rory will dive into in the next section.
Thank you, Sydney. So building from the direction that we received from the outset, the research and the analysis and the consultation that we conducted, I'm pleased to say, has brought us to where we are this evening. So we did, of course, look at what some other municipalities were doing. There was a survey that was conducted. We had a virtual open house, and we received comments and feedback, and we had due regard for all of the input that we received. And I think what we've tried to do is strike the right chord for the town of Smith Falls going forward as it relates to the property standards bylaw and the yards bylaw. What I'd like to do is offer a bit of a recap in terms of the last 1 or 2 steps. Since there had been a previous presentation on an earlier draft of the property standards bylaw and the yard bylaw. Now, at the time, the earlier draft had reflected on the information that we had gathered and some of the lessons learned, and attempted to kind of bring the spirit of live in terms of an update of both documents. The comments that we've received were helpful in refining the way forward and bringing the work to its ultimate culmination. The most important thing I'd like to emphasize in what we did related to the topic of naturalization was in the earlier version of the bylaw, we attempted to define naturalization so that it could then be regulated. One of the things that we received as feedback is that still led to a certain amount of vagary and potential for misinformation and ongoing landowner to landowner disputes where someone believes that their next door neighbor's approach to landscaping is not as aesthetically pleasing as they personally would like it to be. And so in terms of finalization of the yard bylaw on the matter of naturalization, we've moved away from that earlier approach and we've come to a more straightforward, a very clear and easily enforceable approach where we define the things that must be complied with. We make it very clear, for example, what are weeds. We establish the length of turf grass and beyond a length of that, then there's a requirement for it to be addressed. And we've made it clear what is unsafe and requires action. So bringing in these objective criteria is really designed to help this bylaw be effective and allow for essentially the vast majority of the citizens to coexist peacefully in the community, and in those rare occasions where something needs to be enforced on a matter of yard maintenance, then enforcement can happen as necessary. We also, as we worked our way through these, looked to introduce dispute resolution techniques in the yard bylaw that did not exist before. There was a concern in our earlier approach where a landscape architect was identified that this would be a means to, again, adjudicate what was aesthetics, and we wanted to make it clear that the role of a landscape architect is actually there to assist with resolving disputes on the matter of materials or what specific species of plant is or is not considered a noxious weed, for example. There's a tie-in made to the Property Standards Committee as a body where we can resolve concerns if someone feels that they've been served a notice and in fact they're doing something that is perfectly fine. And again, introducing these mechanisms for dispute resolution I think is going to be helpful. And then one of the things I'm happy to say that we were able to do in listening to feedback is introduce an allowance for a very popular movement now called No Mow May, where many owners are being encouraged to actually let their lawns grow out throughout the course of May, because this supports some pollinators in the community, and was a movement that started in the United Kingdom and has become quite popular across North America. So I think we've done a good bit of work now in getting the yard bylaw really tuned in to the needs of the community. As it related to the property standards bylaw, we were on point, I'd like to say, as it related to the previous draft. We've added a little bit of clarification in terms of some minor matters, but then the most important thing is we've made it clear that yard matters are handled by the yard bylaw, and property standard are very much focused on the elements of property standards, where the enforcement regime under the Building Code Act is there for its important purpose, is to address inappropriate construction or dilapidation of buildings, matters of significant public health and safety. We've also made some editorial updates, of course, to improve phrasing, grammar, and make both bylaws understandable. And last but not least, in terms of the administrative approach, based on the suite of changes that we're making, it is just simply administratively easier to repeal the existing bylaws you have and have them replaced with new bylaws. And that is why you have before you new bylaws as the committee. In closing, I think what we've been able to do through the course of this exercise is find the appropriate pathway to support the needs of the community and the needs of the town of Smiths Falls, specifically as local government. We've retained the ability for enforcement in property standards. As I said, in this case, we're dealing with matters of potentially illegal construction, but more significantly, dilapidation. And you need to be able to have the enforcement tools available in those circumstances. We've retained an element of authority as it relates to yards. In the grand scheme of things, the idea is to support the modern sustainability perspectives and generally encourage all citizens to just maintain their yard in a good way, such that the propensity to come in and enforce on matters of aesthetic are not matters whatsoever that need to be addressed anymore, because we've taken matters of aesthetics out of it. And in doing so, I think the most important thing that we've done is we reduce the propensity for protracted disputes in the future. And that is, I think, hugely beneficial, because again, it reduces conflict and allows everyone to go about their life in Smiths Falls, and again, live peacefully beside each other, while also providing an opportunity to express themselves in terms of how they choose to make their landscaping choices. With that, I would like to sincerely thank the town of Smiths Falls for giving us an opportunity to serve the community, and I would like to very much acknowledge the collaboration of Carrie throughout the exercise. She was an absolute pleasure to work with and provided excellent direction to the team, and I very much like to acknowledge that so much of our success was because of her strength of leadership. So my thanks to Carrie as well. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions that members of committee may have this evening.
Thanks, Rory and Sydney. If you would just please take down that slide, I can see everyone then. Thank you. So we have a revised, or we actually have a brand new property standards and yard standards bylaw being proposed. Are there any questions or comments on the proposed changes? I think we've come a long way. Carrie, why don't you lead us off first?
Sorry, I'm not going to ask any questions to Rory. I just wanted to let council know, or to let committee know, that we did have a newly appointed property standards committee. We incorporated them into our planning advisory committee, and I think it's important to know that they were given the bylaws as soon as they were appointed to review. And Dylan was kind enough to meet with them last week as well to walk them through the bylaws, as well as to answer any questions they had. So as new committee members who are taking on this role, it's imperative that they know what they're going to be doing should an appeal be launched. So I just wanted to thank Rory for that, and let council know that the new membership has been duly advised of their role within these two bylaws.
Thank you, Director Costello. And if I understand it, if council agrees to the proposed changes, then it would come forward at a future council meeting as a bylaw, and we would deal with it there.
Correct. There's two bylaws. We have our property standards bylaw and our yards bylaw.
There's probably, we have to rescind them and then put in the new ones. Okay, I saw Councillor Quinn and then Mayor Panko.
Thank you. I've read this over numerous times, and it seems like you've really hit on everything that needs to be addressed, because we don't want to have any issues within the town. It's much easier to have everything laid out, cut and dried. And I mean, I know myself, I have 2 areas of my property that are naturalized. And so it's good for me as a resident of Smiths Falls to know, and it's good for everyone to know. So I was quite impressed with this, this whole study that's happened, and certainly am supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Panko.
Thank you, Sydney. Rory, I think it, as Councillor Quinn mentioned, it's a very comprehensive, 2 comprehensive pieces of work, which I really reflect the intent and spirit of what the previous council, hopefully this council, was looking for. Only question, Rory, I guess, relates to, or Sydney, to the guide, and I know there are a number of plants which are identified here. The prohibited list I don't see isn't here. I know it's in the bylaws, about 30 prohibited and noxious weeds. So just wondering, is there, from a guidance standpoint, to our citizens who wish to follow this path, are there more recommended plantings? And will that be part of the guide? I don't see that in there, or people simply refer to the bylaw, or as long as they're not planting any of the 30 prohibited and noxious weeds, they have a lot more leeway to determine what they would like. Would be the first question.
Through the chair to Mayor Panko this evening, Exactly that. The brochure, the yards brochure that was included in the package identifies a handful of common and native plants that from our landscape professionals' perspective would be the type of plants that many folks would like to see on their property. And then the brochure indicates that for additional ideas, please do speak to your local garden center. And the staff at the local garden center, I'm sure, would guide those well-meaning property owners to choose other types of native plants. And then the list of the weeds themselves is vested in the bylaw. So really, there's a natural kind of an intended spirit between the two documents. The brochure is intended to be encouraging. Please make these good choices and continue to seek good advice. Whereas the bylaw serves that other side of the coin, which is should something inappropriate be happening on the property, the municipality has clear authority and knows specifically what plants are those weeds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For a second question.
Please.
Sure. I guess Director Costello more for this one. So is there a grandfathering provision for existing properties that may not be in full compliance with the terms of the new bylaw, or will they be given a certain period of time to come within compliance?
Currently, there's no grandfathering. It wasn't in our previous bylaw. So it would be, once this bylaw is passed, all properties would be held to the intent of the bylaw, the new bylaw, once it's passed.
Thank you. Anyway,
and yes, my apologies, Mayor Panko, but you are correct. Given that this is a new bylaw, as when we ever change anything that is a big change that what our citizens are used to, there will be an educational element to it, as well as a bit of a campaign and an educational period before there's any type of enforcement to deal with them.
Thank you, and understanding our new website, I believe, will be live this week. Be a great resource for anyone looking to naturalize. So overall, I'm very supportive of what's been presented.
Is there general support for moving this forward, Councillor Brennan? And then I'll go to Councillor Robinson. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Rory. I mean, I've gotten to know you pretty well because we've talked on numerous occasions about this, and I think you've, as I said, you've got to sort of thread the needle here. I think you have, and so I'll be in support of it. And just to remind, I mean, I think as a walker, I was walking down the street one day and came across this naturalized garden on it was Harold Street, and the fellow was out, and I said, "This is a naturalized garden." He's like, "Yeah." He said, "I got the ideas from Real," so that's another resource for people to use. And so, I mean, we live in a very friendly community. Our neighbors are friendly to each other. So my hope is that this will enable that to continue. And as I think you mentioned to the planning committee last week, if we can come through with a bylaw that results in very few or no complaints, then we are a success. So I think that you might have done it here. And as I said, I think you've threaded the needle. So good for you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Robinson.
I also will be supporting this. I think it's a great initiative, and I think you've done a very good job at it. I also would like to thank you for the in-depth information you gave us last week at the planning committee. It enlightened me a lot. And I guess that's pretty much it. Like I'm in favor of it.
Okay, thank you. And I saw Councillor Miller put her thumb up, so she was in favor. I had one question was, do you know if the Smiths Falls Horticultural Society commented specifically on this, or I know everyone was welcome to, but did you recall anything from them?
We didn't receive comment from the Horticultural Society.
Okay. Okay.
But I am sure that they would appreciate knowing that Smiths Falls is moving in a direction such as this.
Yeah. I can't see Councillor McGuire, but he's not raising his hand or speaking up. So I'm going to assume that we've got a green light on this and thank everyone from Dillon and Director Costello. Thank you very much. And this will be coming forward soon at a council meeting. for ratification. Thank you and good night. We're moving on now to the new 8.2, which is the Smiths Falls vaccination policy. And Director Costello, are you going to speak to this just to get it going?
I certainly will. So as council will recall, and I'm sure even the new members of council are aware that the town has a COVID-19 vaccination policy. It was brought into effect in November of 2021, and it includes both all of staff, council members, local board and committee members, as well as contract employees. So that each person, anybody who fits into those categories must be vaccinated, fully vaccinated against COVID-19, with the definition of fully vaccinated still being with 2 vaccinations. So we're bringing forward this report this evening as a recommendation to maintain the town's current COVID vaccination policy for the until further notice. In the report, you'll see that there's a lot of evidence, both from the federal government, as well as the provincial government, as well as our own wastewater testing manager, Jason Barlow, gave us some information about COVID-19 within our own municipality, and it is still present within Smiths Falls. The report also outlines council's requirement under the Occupational Health and Safety Act to do everything reasonable in the circumstance to protect for the protection of a worker. So we just bring this forward this evening for your review, for your discussion, to answer any questions you may have about our current policy. But it is management's recommendation that we maintain the current policy for the near future anyhow, and bring it forward as the pandemic evolves. And I think it's also important to denote, and I found this out today, that the World Health Organization is still determining this as a pandemic. So bring that up and bring that forward for your review.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
I'd like to ask a question through you. How many municipalities are still enforcing a vaccination policy in our area?
That is a great question, Councillor Robinson. I don't have an answer for you. I do know that at the time that we had ours, that the majority of the municipalities within the county did have one in effect. I couldn't tell you how many have rescinded though, but I would happily find that out for you.
Yeah, if you don't mind, please.
I don't mind at all.
All right, thank you.
And Mayor Panko.
Yeah, thanks, Director Costello. And to Mr. Robinson, or Councilor Robinson's question, I know I did a little bit of research on the weekend, and I think City of Ottawa, City of Kingston, I think City of Toronto, or there's 3 having a check that have rolled back or removed their vaccination policy. And while I acknowledge we're still in a pandemic, and I think every week we hear someone else who is still struggling through some of the symptoms of COVID, and we know it's still killing a lot of people worldwide. I'm not sure the policy was very relevant when we brought it into place over a year ago. I'm not sure it is as relevant today, in my opinion, largely due to the realization that the 2 vaccines that would have been in place prior to this policy coming in, or at the same time, don't, to my reading and understanding, don't have the same efficacy over a year later. So the effectiveness of the vaccines we received at that point in time may no longer be providing a great amount of immunity. And while we have boosters, and many of us, myself included, have had the boosters, our policy speaks to the provision for 2 vaccines. So if we want to ensure we were truly providing, I think, the best and the most robust protection for our staff and encouraging it, we would be moving the policy to 3 or potentially 4 vaccines, required annual vaccinations, which would take us away from the trend we're seeing elsewhere in other municipal governments. So at this stage, I don't think we want to increase the barrier, recognizing that we're learning to move ahead. And as much as COVID is still present within us, many of the public health restrictions that were in place when this policy was enacted are no longer in place either. So in my opinion, I think I'm prepared to move ahead without a policy to put this policy on the shelf, recognizing that if things changed again and things worsened, we may want to revisit it.
Okay, all right, Councillor Brennan, and then Councillor McGuire, and then back to Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I got to agree with the mayor. For those of us that were on council at the time, it was a super duper stressful situation. And, I was the first one to put my hand up to do this because there were so many unknowns. And, it was like, this is what we have to do as a society. And that was 2 years ago. So things have changed. We have effective vaccines. We have a treatment if you happen to get a COVID. I'm watching the federal government. Director Costello mentioned the feds and the province with data. I don't think they have vaccine mandates anymore. I don't think the city of Ottawa has vaccine mandates anymore. I don't think the town of Perth has vaccine mandates. I think it's a trend. And, it was a very difficult decision for us 2 years ago because it affected people's lives and people that I knew and probably Mayor Panko knew and the chair knew it and Councillor McGuire knew and it affected their lives. And I think now's the time to move on. People can move freely. They can enter any of our facilities freely. And for a time, that wasn't the case. So I'm not supportive of staff's recommendations. I think it's time to move on. And as the mayor said, if things change for the worse, then we'll deal with it then. But I think that people need to get on with their lives and their decision on how to protect themselves. They know how to do that. And I've had 4 shots and I've had COVID and I got through it. And so I think it's time that we to loosen things up. I think we should rescind this policy now with, given if something happens, then we'll revisit it, but I think we should rescind it.
Thank you. Councillor McGuire, then Councillor Robinson.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to see a consensus around dropping the policy. I know the federal government's dropped their policy, and unlike in Smith Falls with the federal government, everybody that isn't vaccinated has had the opportunity to come back to work after an unpaid leave. So I think this is the least we can do, and I think it's way overdue at this point.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm in total agreement with rescinding that. And as has been stated several times, in the event that it makes a drastic comeback, we can always go back and put it back into effect. But I agree with the mayor. Like, we should put it on the shelf for now.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Miller.
So I repeat what the mayor and Councillor Brennan and others have said, and I support rescinding the policy at this time.
Thank you. And Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. I am also on that agreement. I believe this is something that we're going to have to deal with, and we need to move forward. We need to learn to keep ourselves as safe as possible. But I do believe that this whole policy should be put on the shelf for now. And like everyone's saying, if things get worse again, okay, we'll look at it again. We'll deal with it then. But for now, let's move on with life. Let's get back to as much normal as we can. Thank you.
Okay, Director Costello, council has spoken.
Council has spoken. Thank you. We'll have a bylaw to rescind that at our next regular meeting of council.
Thank you. So we're moving on to the elevated water tank. Mr. Barlow or Ms. Director McMahon, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evenings, members of council. Yeah, so I'm happy to bring this report in front of council this evening. Really primarily for the reason that this does see that the water tower project is advancing to the next step, which is the detailed design and tender preparation staging the project, if you will, to award it to a general contractor once we get through the detailed design and the tender prep. So it's exciting. We know this project's been a long time coming. We started the municipal class EA back in the summer of 2017 as a result of a failed inspection, if you will, of the well, not a failed inspection, but an inspection of the existing water tower that showed and identified some structural issues with the existing water tower. Not to mention the fact that we've seen quite a bit of, well, at that time, projected growth, and I think right now we're in the right in the midst of the growth within town with the boom with development and whatnot, and we know we need more capacity within our water tower or elevated water storage tank, if you will, that's noted in the report. So I'm happy to say that we did put a RFP out back in November 14th of last fall. It took us a little bit of time over the summer to develop that document, to make sure we had our I's dotted and our T's crossed. And on December 22nd, we closed on that RFP, and we did have 5 proponents that did respond to the RFP. So in my opinion, that was a successful call to that RFP. Coincidentally, we had EVB Engineering, RV Anderson, and JL Richards, who are all 3 parties, 3 consulting firms that Jason Barlow has the ability to pull into different projects and whatnot at council's endorsement from previous council direction. So they all bid the project, as did Greer Galloway and Stantec Consulting Limited. So all very reputable consulting firms out there. So that was really great to see. It made our review a little bit more difficult in the office here. So we had 3 different people on the review committee, staff, if you will. There was different things that we looked at. Obviously, the technical proposal side of things weighed very heavily. It was out of 100 points. And then the financial proposal, if you will, from the proponents scored a score of 20. So why that's important and why we don't necessarily always drill down just on price. I mean, obviously, this is a very, very large project, very different than some of the other tenders that we put out that, you know, if we're buying a product, you know, a quotation for something, then price will be paramount. But in this particular case, we want to make sure that we have the right proponent in place, that they have the right team developed to tackle a project of this scale. So that's why we score the technical side of things much higher than the pricing proposal. So anyways, all that to say is we went through the scoring criteria. We did identify that EVB Engineering, although they weren't necessarily the lowest score out of the 5, we felt that their technical proposal was highest for both of the assignments. The one assignment being the water tower proper, and then the associated trunk water main. We broke them out into 2 different projects to give us a little bit of, well, I guess to give us the opportunity, if council wished, to break the project up into 2 different projects designed by 2 different consultants. Through the review, we've identified that EVB Engineering scored highest for both, coincidentally. And so we're looking for council's endorsement tonight to pass a resolution to award both of those projects for engineering design and tender preparation to EVB Engineering to the tune of just shy of $245,000 excluding tax. So with that, I'd be happy through the chair to take any questions, and I got Jason here too. So for the 2 of us, if I can't answer them, we'll tag team on it.
Okay, Councillor Quinn, why don't you start us off?
Thank you. The one thing that you have just said, Paul, on this was you did not look at the lowest price. I always think that is so important. We need to look at the quality. We need to look at the knowledge. We need to know where these companies are coming from and their abilities. And to not rate the lowest really stands high in my book. So I thank you very much for that. This is a very interesting report. This is going to be a big project, and we want it done properly. Thank you.
Director McMunn.
Yeah, I just wanted to note, and thank you, Councillor Quinn. I just wanted to note and reiterate that these are all 5 firms are very, very reputable in their line of work, which made it very difficult when we were scoring scoring them against each other. And that's effectively what we had to do because they're all so reputable. We had to score them against each other and basically for the town's interest, find who we felt was the best proponent to do the work. I will note that EVB Engineering in both cases were under the weighted average for each of the 5 when we take the average price, which is important to note as well. So it'd be a different story if they scored higher than the average, that we might be having a different conversation here this evening. But the reality is they were not just marginal, but they were well under the average price.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I like the idea of instead of splitting it into 2 different projects, being able to identify that you go with one company who can do both. In the long run, I'm sure that's going to save money somewhere. I think that's a good idea. Then you've got continuity of the same people working through, no differences of opinion, in my opinion. Anyway, that's it.
So you're supporting this?
I am in support of that.
Thank you. Director McMunn, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, yeah, there's definitely synergies to have one consulting firm looked after the project as a whole. But why we split it up into 2 is just to give us that opportunity to look at them at 2 separate projects, see if there was, if it made sense at the end of the day. In this particular case, it made sense to keep them together, but we wanted to leave that as an option open for us.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Miller up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director McMunn, for your report. I do support your recommendation tonight.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Mayor Panko?
Yeah, thanks, Director McMunn. I support the recommendation, but just concerned with how the pricing has evolved. I guess we had 147,000 in the 2022 budget. I assume that might have been based on 2021 or earlier early analysis. And now we're 102,000 over that. And is that just a reflection of where things are today compared to where they were a couple of years ago?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as you can see, the prices are, there's quite a range in the pricing, all the way from, if we look at the trunk water main, I think Greer Galloway was in around 88,000, and the highest price was 195 from JL Richards. And then with the other project, the lowest price at 115 again from Greer Galloway, all the way up to 230,000. So yeah, so the pricing for the pricing for the engineering was identified a couple of years back and prior to my time, but it's been carried forward in the budget a couple of years. And I guess it would have been last year's budget. There wasn't any additional money put in there. So I would have to argue that we're playing a little bit of catch up here just because of inflationary costs, and there isn't any material going into the design and tender preparation, but there's other influencing factors. And I think it is solely attributed to just the costs that we see amongst different industries, different work. That's the reality. We have to deal with that going forward. The scary thing is, to answer your question, when we get to tendering the project for the actual construction, not any of us here have a crystal ball. We know what inflation's done for this past year in 2022, sitting at 7% plus. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But what I will say with that is we did look at the numbers, the numbers that were identified in the municipal Class A by JL Richards a couple of years ago. There's healthy contingency in there. There's healthy bit of a buffer in there for this project. So there already was some money's kind of worked into that $8.5 million budgetary cost for the whole thing. So I'm hopeful that when we do get to tendering the project that we come in on budget, but I can't guarantee anything. None of us can. So,
We'll remain hopeful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing consensus to support staff recommendation and awarding EVB Consulting. I'm seeing everybody's on board with that. So thank you, Director McMunn.
Thank you.
And don't go away. You and Mr. Barlow can talk about the inspection report of the water tower and our beautiful elevated tank. So was that Mr. Barlow, or is that you?
Yeah, I can start off.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, Mayor, members of council. Tonight I bring forward report 2023-018, and this is our 2022 elevated tank inspection report as requested by council through our budgetary process. Some background. So this inspection was completed in May of 2022. And the reason it was done at that point is it was a result of a repair that was required in a corrosion hole and a leak that had to be repaired. So at that time, we had to take the tank down. So it was a good opportunity to complete the inspection at the same time as the repair. And further to that, there was another leak on June 17th. As we know through the report, there is a lot of corrosion and different aspects of the current tower that need to be addressed to remain in service for water. And that is why the previous report with our detailed design for the water tower is put in place, because it was not practical or economical to reuse this tower for water services. We need to move to something that is more state of the art and be able to allow for the requirements through the ministry and other projects for the planning with the town to make sure that we are adequate sized reservoirs. The report really speaks for itself. One aspect I'd like to make aware is that the report is a visual inspection only. This landmark did not do any other testing, x-ray or anything else other than just their visual experience based on working on other structures of a similar nature over the past many years. Director McMahon has more to add, or I believe the report's there if you have any questions on it.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. I found that picture of the leak actually a little terrifying. The water springing out, and I just keep thinking about a dam bursting. So the image was scary. Any comments or questions, Councillor Miller?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Barlow, for your report. So you talked about the structural integrity as a water holding unit. Does that leave the door open a slight bit of a crack for potentially looking at the existing water tower as the Smith Falls version of the CN Tower?
Through the chair, that is one of the reasons why you had the report and why there was a budgeted amount in our first draft for the 2022 budget to complete a structural analysis for that kind of a use. We know it's not something that we want to keep in place for the water or for an asset for utilities. And we don't have the expertise to say that it can be used for anything else without being able to complete a structural analysis to ensure that it can stand to be used for something other than water.
Thank you.
Councillor Robinson?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. My biggest concern with spending more money on, a consultant to review and inspect the tower for another purpose is it's still basically 100 years old. It's metal and it's going to keep corroding. And I'm not certain it'll be structurally sound in another 10 years. So I'm just throwing it out there. I really don't think we can salvage it, to be quite honest, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, that we're not being asked to make that decision tonight. We're asked to receive this report, but you're right. That decision will be coming, Councillor Robinson, we'll have to deal with it at some point. Mr. Barlow, did you want to comment?
Yeah, through the chair, just as kind of some more information, but in the report, they do state that even after refurbishment, there's still those hidden areas of corrosion. So Landmark builds these tanks. I believe they are 80 to 90% of these structures within Ontario. and possibly more of Canada. There are not too many other services or companies that work on the towers. So their visual expertise, I believe, can be used based on that because they do say that even if you do refurbish it, you're still going to have hidden areas that, because of the style of tank and the structure of the tank, that there's just nothing you can do with those areas and stop them from corroding if they've already started.
Okay, thank you. I have a list. If you could go in this order, please. Councillor Brennan, Councillor McGuire, Councillor Quinn, and Mayor Panka. So Councillor Brennan.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the report. And this is a question, it's not for today, but that's, I remember when this started last term, and I guess my question to whoever the engineer was at the time was, is there any reason or is there any precedent for a water tower to be left standing after it not used for water? And there is precedence, but the question would be, how much is it going to cost? The other one is, how much is it going to cost to take it down? And what's the yearly maintenance of it, and that sort of thing. So I'm happy to receive this. I'm not ready to. I would need some more information before I would determine whether that iconic thing in Smith Falls is coming down.
Right, and that's not on the agenda tonight, so we don't have to deal with it. Director McMunn, and then we're going to go to Councillor McGuire.
Yeah, I just wanted to state the point that, the water tower, the existing water tower isn't going anywhere anytime and right away. we have to build the new water tower, of course. So, I mean, we have some time. The report here tonight is really tabling the idea of, and we're not looking for a decision tonight. We're just looking to put it in the forefront of council's mind that should you wish to repurpose the water tower, there will be a cost to do a little bit more of a detailed analysis, X-ray assessment and whatnot of the structural components. But I just want to reiterate that until the new tower is built, this isn't going away. We have until the fall of 2026, based on our funding criteria through our ICIP Greenstream grant, to finish the new water tower. So we've got some time. This water tower will maintain its service for the next 3 years or so.
Great. Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just asked that the report get sent to the Municipal Heritage Committee so they can take a look at it too. I think not that it's relevant to tonight's decision, but for context going forward in future conversations, I think there's good information here to share.
Does anybody object to that suggestion? Everybody's okay with that? Great. So that is a direction. Thank you. Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. This was a really great report. Thank you for all the hard work you put into it. I guess at the moment, my mind isn't into whether we can leave the old water tower standing after it's no longer being used, but will the old water tower last till we get the new one built? Because I also saw the leaks. I've seen the leaks a couple of times from that water tower. So hopefully it will last. Any thoughts on that, either Jason or Paul?
Jason, you can take a stab at that one if you.
Through the chair, we will continue to operate as we have in the past, that if there is an issue or a leak, that we will continue to make the repairs until such time that the tank will no longer be used for our potable water service.
Okay, thank you.
And Mayor Panka.
Yeah, I think Councillor Quinn sort of stole my question a little bit there, and having been in the area driven by seeing water spew out of it is always very concerning, but we recognize that there's been quite a few leaks in recent years, and probably not uncommon for a 99-year-old tower, but the visuals and the inspection report obviously are very concerning, but I guess the bigger question will be, we'll move into our budget discussions. Like the immediate question would be, do we want to spend $60,000 on more of a structural inspection to determine whether, I guess, what the potential risk and cost could be if we want to maintain it as something. And I don't know if that's going to be, we'll see how the conversation goes. I do know there are examples of water towers being repurposed in different areas. So someone coincidentally sent me one from Portugal today that is accessible. They put stairs and an elevator up to it with a viewing platform, and then you've got a periscope at the top, and it gives you a full view all around the entire town. It's a neat thing, but again, that would be probably $2 million project that we need to, I guess, let's cross the bridge first, whether we want to do a deeper investigation. But anyway, for the report, we received the report, and to Councillor Quinn's point, let's just hope this can last long enough to serve its final purpose.
Okay, so thank you for the report. We have received it, a good discussion, and status quo. Thank you for now. Appreciate that. We're into now the 2023 draft budget report. Treasurer Dickey, welcome back. Are you going to walk us through something, or?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, yes. I'll just a couple of comments on the report before, if I'm allowed. Staff have done our best to take the comments and discussion from council to date and summarize them in the report. Just a couple of things on the operating side. There were a few. The first draft that went on the 9th was those submissions were in December. So there were a few minor adjustments, and as well, we've got some preliminary numbers from the county. So we've added them in here just as an estimate to put into the budget. And as well, there's staff are proposing community donations adjustment based on what we expect the need to be. This wasn't directed by council. This is something as we've reviewed the numbers and looked at ways to offset the extra county money that's in there. So there's about $250,000 there at this point. Different from the one that was looked at by council back in previous discussions. On the capital side, again, we've done our best to take the discussion, debate, the direction, the suggestions from council and incorporate them into Schedule 1 of the report with trying to take the ideas and put them into suggested revisions for council to review and provide input tonight. And just one thing I wanted to mention that just came to my attention today, off the original capital budget, it appears we missed a carryover item from last year. There was a Heritage Conservation District project last year that was approved by council for $120,000 to be funded from reserves. So I believe that should have been brought forward and put into this first draft this year. So that will, so I'll mention that tonight. That can be discussed tonight if need be, but there's $120,000 there to be funded from reserves that I believe should have been carried forward into the carry forward items on the drafts that council's been looking at. So just to draw that to your attention. Other than that, staff are ready to take any further direction or questions on the proposed changes that we're putting in the report.
I'm going to suggest that we talk about the community grants and not allow Councillor Miller to step aside. We can make that decision and bring her back in. So do you want to speak specifically about that change that staff are recommending to the 173 figure? Either you or CEO Morris. It was a reduction, I believe, of 40,000 in community donations is what you're suggesting.
Yes, I'll just make a couple of comments, and CEO Morris can also add to it. Yeah, in discussions himself and the director of corporate service. So yeah, we're just looking at kind of the applications to date, the items previously approved by council, and just anticipating what staff know of that could be coming down the pipe. That was a suggestion, which is probably the reduction would be to 133 would be more in line with kind of anticipated. With a little bit of extra room, but anticipated need for this year. So it was just a suggestion brought forward by staff. So I don't know if CEO Morris has any other wants to add to that.
Yeah, through the chair. So I think Mr. Dickey covered it. We know that council endorsed spending 103,000. We only know of one other project that we're expecting an application for, and it is an open window to apply. We don't have set application deadlines. The first one was November 30th. After that, we take applications as they come in. So based on our knowledge of anticipated applications, we see 30,000 as being sufficient based on what we know today. So to free up a little bit of, find some savings, we're recommending that 40,000 be removed to adjust it to 133,000.
For 2023 only.
Correct.
Okay, and then okay. Does anybody have any objections to this? Can we accept that? Okay. So I'm going to invite Councillor Miller, if we could find her somehow, we'll send her a text. There you are. So you're back. Thank you. So there were some other points. How do you want to do this, folks? There's, if you remember the document, if we looked at the, I guess it's the capital budget first, there's, I think, 6 suggestions in there. And one was they've added in the 8,000 for the runway at the airport. Comments or support for that being in there? Councillor Brennan, you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I support that. That's been in there for years and years, and it's crack sealing, and it's just maintenance. So it's I don't remember that not being in.
Yeah, and I saw some thumbs going up. Anybody does not want to see that in there? Okay, so it's okay. And then the next one was the under utilities. The cost has gone up as a result of the tender for that work, gone up significantly. Councillor Robinson, do you want to speak to that? It's 324,000 higher than the expected.
Well, yes, Mr. Chair. I was at the tender opening, and it came in, I believe it was 999,000 or something to that effect. But what my question was is, it's still 84,685 over what the tender was, and I was just wondering what that was for.
Perhaps Director McMahon or.
Yeah, through the chair.
Yes, Mr. Barlow.
Yeah, so there in the tender opening, that was cost with HST. If we add in our net HST, which is only 1.76%, that is the reduction from the tender opening cost to the cost that will be provided in a report next week for council's review.
Okay. Now we don't, the danger of treating these in isolation and making decisions on them is when we get down to the bottom. But this one, Councillor Miller, I shouldn't say the danger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just looking at the next point down, and a question for Mr. Barlow or Director McMahon is, what is our risk if we then delay the sanitary sewer lining in order to have the extra money for the bar screen project? Is there risk to our residents in deferring that piece of work?
Director McMahon?
Yeah, so the sewer main relining underneath the rail lines, that was something that, yeah, that's simply risk mitigation. That's something that's good practice. Those are still aged pipes, but we don't necessarily have any deficient areas or issues with that sewer. It's simply based on location underneath the tracks. It'll have to be lined at sometime. So that's why we decided that's some low-hanging fruit there. We could pull that one and we can defer that down the line, given the fact this one came in over budget. So we're comfortable to do so. That would be staff's recommendation.
Thank you.
Yep.
So staff have determined with their expertise that the bar screen project is more important to get done this year, and they're deferring the other one for 485,000 until 2024. Are council comfortable with that offset? Yes, I'm getting consensus. Thank you. Now, again, going on to Marguerite Allen Ross sidewalk and storm sewer, they're bundled. So we were going to set aside some money in this budget and the balance in 2024. Councillor McGuire, why don't you start us off?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd be okay taking out the 200,000 from this year's budget and postponing that. If we look at the active transportation plan, the Marguerite section's rated medium. We've got a lot of high priorities in the active transportation plan that aren't getting addressed in this budget. And also in the active transportation plan, the estimated budget for the sidewalks was 35,000, whereas it's over 10 times that now. So if the active transportation plan was the motivation of how this got into the capital budget, I think we need to look back to it now that we're sharpening our pencils, and I think it's an easy 200 grand to find for this year's budget.
So for this year, okay. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I'm not okay with taking it out. I mean, we talked about this in our budget meeting. So the reasons are not just for the active transportation, it's for fairness for the people on Marguerite Street as well. And actually my suggestion was going to be with the 200, I think that we could probably, and I'll look to Director McMunn, we could probably get some planning done, if that's not already been done in terms of design and that sort of thing this year, and spend some of that 200 to get it ready.
Director McMunn.
Thank you.
Or you're on mute, Director McMunn, sorry.
Sorry, my apologies. So if council remembers, recalls last year, you afforded my department to purchase a total station with the idea that we could bring some of this design work in-house. So we've completed the topographic survey, so that's completed. We'll do the design for Marguerite. We've surveyed Allen and Ross as well. I just wanted to note with the Allen and Ross portion of the project, there is an issue with the water main down on Ross Street. We've got a 10-inch water main there that's causing some fire flow issues in the area. So that's why we paired that up with the sidewalk and curb work on Allen Street up to the Marguerite Street, sorry. But yeah, so we will do that in-house. But yeah, if council did afford us some time, it would allow us to get, to focus on some of the other projects that we have on. We could take the year to do some pre-engineering, some design, finish off the design for that project, have it shovel ready for 2024. Not that we couldn't this year, but it would take some of the pressure off for sure.
And the obvious question, I think, where Councillor Brennan was going, would that be less than 200 if we did that? Or would you have a sense of what that cost would be and we put that in?
For which, sorry, the 200?
Well, for that design work.
Oh, yeah, well, like I say, the efforts will be made in-house, so it'll be just staff time to do the design work. We won't have to hire a consultant to do so.
Okay. I've got Councillor Quinn next.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am very much in support of getting Marguerite, Allen, and Ross Street done. If it has to go to another year, I could live with that, but I don't want to see it taken out. It's, in my personal opinion, don't know why it didn't happen when Wood Avenue was being done, but I'm sure there was a good reason, but I do not want to see it going away. So I would be in favor of leaving the money there, leaving it on the table, and it happen next year if it's not going to happen this year.
Yeah, that question's come up a couple of times, Councillor Quinn, and the answer was we didn't have the money at the time. The town didn't.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Councillor McGuire, you wanted to come back to something? And
Yes,
okay.
I'd just like to note that there's nothing wrong with the existing stormwater system on Marguerite Street. Having open ditches like that provides filtration to the water through the grass. It provides higher infiltration to the groundwater, and it's a commonly used tool. The City of Ottawa uses it all the time. So this is a nice to have thing. This is something that may improve the aesthetics, but ultimately it's I don't see it in the asset management plan. If it's not in the active transportation plan, I want to know what policy is guiding this decision, because there's a lot of really strong language being used without the data to back it up. So if we're going to spend $200,000 on this, I need more information to support that.
Thank you. Mayor Panko?
Thank you. I know we're moving closer to balancing a budget here, and we've stood strong in that we don't want a tax rate increase of greater than 3.38%. And we also recognize there's also a lot of borrowing already in the budget. I think every time I take in, I don't have it in front of me, but I think by the time we take in the water tower and Catherine Street, I think it's around 3.3 million. So we're also looking at doing close to $20 million in capital work. Well, we've got to find a way to get ourselves to a good outcome here if we want to try and reach consensus. So while I recognize there's a lot of merit of having the sidewalks, especially on Marguerite and Allen over to Ross, but at the same time, we're trying to come up with a balance here. So as Councillor McGuire mentioned, it's not part of our asset management plan. It is a medium priority within our active transportation plan. So it's something it sort of come off at a left field to some extent. I recognize the residents there have been expressing their desire to see it changed, rehabilitated, and match wood, especially if we see what wood looks like now and how well wood functions now. So in this situation, I think if we're still a little ways off from getting where we need to be, and if the detailed design if that can all be done in-house, there's really no merit of setting aside $200,000 in this year's budget if it looks like, based on what we see in front of us, we have to borrow $250,000. So why did we borrow $250 and put $200 of that into a reserve for a project that could be completed next year? So I would suggest we take the 200 out, staff proceed with all the preparatory work, and this come back next year for discussion. With that 200 out, Treasurer Dickey, I assume you can probably do the calculations there, but I assume that probably brings us virtually to where we would need to be.
Okay. Councillor Miller, do you want to comment on this, or Councillor Robinson? And are we clear on the question? It was there's support for obviously going ahead with those sidewalks and that ditching work, but if a lot of that planning work is going to be done in-house, there may not be there wouldn't be a 200,000 cost to it. So putting that out for this year would do a couple of things. One, staff would advance the planning of that work for 2024 or beyond. And then it would also get us much closer to balancing our budget. So I think that's really the point. So Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was putting my hand up to support Councillor Brennan's comments, because I would like to see this project go ahead, not just for the Marguerite Street piece, but for Ross and Allen and the work that needs to be done, that we've kind of grouped all of this together. And I appreciated Director McMahon saying we could do this work in-house. So I'm fine with Mayor Panko's suggestion that we start to pay for this next year. And I would hope, based on what I've heard around the council table here tonight, that we do put this in next year's budget. So that is a bit of a leap of faith, but I do support Mayor Panko's idea.
Okay, Councillor Robinson.
As Councillor Brennan mentioned, like, we did discuss this at the first draft budget meeting, and we decided to cut it in half, basically. I'd be okay with going ahead as mentioned if by next year, when it gets put in, if we have shovel-ready project ready to go, I'd be good with that. But I don't want to see it get shelved and not happen, because it's a very important thing to do, in my opinion, because of the amount of seniors that are walking due to Settler Square, and the number of kids. We need sidewalks, and like to me, it's a safety concern. It's not an active transportation concern; it's a safety concern, and that's the reason why I'm in favor of doing it. So if it can be shovel ready, done in-house, and be shovel ready for the next budget, and if we're willing to accept the full value of it in the next budget, so be it.
And I know no one can promise you what next year is going to bring or what it's going to look like, but it's pretty clear there's appetite around with many of you to move ahead with this project this year or next, but I'm hearing, and I'll stand corrected, that there's in a way to get our budget closer to balancing this year, if staff do the in-house work, as Councillor Roberts has pointed out, and it's ready to go next year, then that money could come out of the budget this year, and the council will make that decision next year of putting it up as a priority again. If I know it's not unanimous, but I'm hearing enough of you to say that we could do it that way. Are we clear? Are we okay with that for now? It gets us much closer to that budget. Yeah, thank you. I was waving my arms around.
Lost you for a moment there. I guess in the meantime, understanding this is an active transportation improvement, if staff could look at the possibility of active transportation grants that could help support this. And I don't know if it would be eligible based on it's an area of town that has no sidewalks today, if that's an enhancement, but something I guess for staff to consider. Perhaps they already have, but worth considering.
Okay. So the last two on this one are the trail, Lower Reach Park, and the recommendation is that we deferred that till 2024, and their staff will look into grant funding for that. So that's about 60,000 that wouldn't be in there for this year, and I'm assuming that's okay with everyone. Councillor Miller?
Sorry, can I just get clarification on which project we're referring to on this?
It's the Lower Reach Trail project, and that's as much as I have. Would one of the staff like to just expand on that a little bit? CO Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this was a project to resurface and realign the existing soft surface walking trail through Lower Reach Park. It may have been arguably premature in this budget because we applied for funding. It's a $300,000 estimated project. We applied for funding, but we've not received confirmation yet. So in the best case scenario, if we get funding, we have until the end of 2025 to spend it. So that gives us some runway to bring it back next year. And have a more fulsome discussion about what it's going to look like, what it will result in terms of improvements. We'll have a more refined cost, but we have applied for 80% funding. So if we get it, we'll bring back something more fulsome for council to consider. Staff feel comfortable removing this from the budget for 2023.
Thanks for clarifying.
And I'm getting nods from council. We also feel comfortable removing it. So then that leaves on the capital side, the results for the water tower detailed design has been increased, as we spoke about earlier, from 147 to 249. But if I read this correctly, the cost to be funded from grants, so no impact on the funding requirement, but it will show up in this as part of our budget package. Yes, but no cost. Okay,
That's correct, Mr. Chair. This project, including the detailed design, is eligible for funding, and we know we have an envelope of 3.65 million. So we would fund the balance from the grant. So there's no impact to the 2023 capital budget from the capital reserve perspective.
Okay, and council agrees with that as well. So if we just look, Councillor Quinn.
Just from my mind, what about the library renovations and Confederation Bridge? What are we having any discussion on those two capital investments?
Well, we did have. These were the points that were brought up by staff that have been tweaked since the first draft to the second draft. Mr. Dickey, did you want to comment on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes. Yeah. In the report itself, I've highlighted a few things that weren't, that were kind of maybe subjective from or different from what was discussed at the 17th meeting. So if you, or if council can go to Schedule 1, there are those few other items that Councillor Don has mentioned that are in the Schedule 1. So a few other items that it would be good for council to go through that list as well, which include the ones she's mentioned that were discussed at the last meeting as well, but not summarized again in the report.
Right. So we will get there. So Councillor Quinn, we will do that one, but not this minute. But
Thank
just look at the operating side. There were also some changes and adjustments there. Do you want to speak to that on the operating side, or it looks like some give and take right down the line? Do you want to say anything about that, Mr. Dickey or CEO Morse? Or is it self-explanatory?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. Yeah, the biggest item there is the county. We didn't, as I think we talked about a previous deliberation night, we hadn't put any estimate in there yet. So that's by far the biggest item of this change from the first draft. The community donations we talked about, and then the rest of them are the softball diamond issue was with that capital item that was talked about with the netting. We've removed that for this draft, and we put some operating monies in there to look at other options for that softball diamond. And the other ones are, yeah, are minor, relatively minor ones that have come up, kind of requests by staff since the first draft. They've just put some corrections and some changes that net out to not a whole lot, but just that they've asked to put in this next draft.
Okay. Any comments on those operating changes? CEO Morris?
Yeah, just to augment with Mr. Dickey, his explanation. So we didn't have the county budget when we brought the first draft to you. It was discussed subsequent to the first draft, so that's where the number came from. We assumed a status quo budget from the county in the first draft in the absence of any other direction. So we're seeing this increase. It is significant. I think it's about 12% for some of those county shared services. So we do need to have a conversation. At the Roma conference, we heard an announcement from the Minister of Health that there will be an increase in paramedic service funding. So we'll circle back to the county and see what impact that might have. But based on what we know today, January 30th, 269 is the increase. If we can lower that, we certainly will, working in concert with the county. But that's the best available information we have at this point. I don't think it will fluctuate considerably from what we have in front of you.
Okay. So if we do want to go to Schedule 1, the revisions from first draft to second draft on the capital budget, to Councillor Quinn's point, just going down that list, do staff want to make any comments, or will I just throw it open and see what my colleagues want to say about that? CEO Morris?
I would be happy to just breeze through it, and if questions arise, we can answer those questions.
Please do.
Is that good? Okay. So the first, the top item is the electric vehicle charging station. The direction was to eliminate one of them. So this will still give us capacity to install one at the water treatment plant, but we'll defer the wastewater treatment plant until next year. So that saved took 15,000 out. The bar screen project, we've talked a little bit about that. That came in way over what we expected. It's an important project. We believe firmly it needs to proceed. However, Director McMunn will bring a report forward, I think next week, to award the project, but we do want to engage in a conversation about taking a value engineering approach to see why these numbers are so much higher than what we anticipated they would be. But based on what we know today, we need $1,084,000 to proceed with that project. Next one, we talked about the rail crossing, the sewer relining. That's something that can be deferred without immediate consequence. The pelletizer study, again, an important study to look at the future of that operation. It's a very labor and energy intensive operation. We need to look at alternatives. that can be delayed, but I would offer that if we can find savings on the bar screen project, we'll likely bring this one back to you to reconsider for 2023, because I think it's an important project. Worst case scenario, we defer it till 2024. But again, this was simply a strategy to make up for the additional cost for the bar screen project, because it is clearly the highest priority. The old water tower.
Excuse me, CEO Morris, Mayor Panko had a comment on that. or a question?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, CEO Morris. I appreciate the opportunity to defer, but I think your comments that it is a very important project that in the long run, I assume could lead to incredible energy savings at the facility, which would lead to a lower operating cost over the long run, and probably something that could be eligible for some potential green energy grants or energy conservation grants, I hope, in the future. So just, I guess, add my support to the suggestion that if there's an opportunity to get that in for 2023, I would be supportive of that, because the sooner we do it, the sooner we have potential options that could save us more in the long run.
Okay.
Okay.
Councillor Quinn? Okay.
Thank you. So I'm in favor of watching it, but I had a very interesting conversation with Peter Au, as everyone knows, and this new project that he has going on, the biochar, I believe it's called, he's suggesting that there could be something with that that could be used in conjunction with the pelletizer. So I think we should keep our minds open and maybe be looking for some of these other options that we could use that might save us some money. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be watching it, but let's keep our minds open and see what else is out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is the.
Okay, so we have the old water tower report. So committee just considered the condition of the existing water tower. So we will need direction on this one. We've removed it from the budget, but we're looking for direction as to whether you're comfortable leaving it out. Because clearly the study we had done does not tell the full structural picture of the existing water tower.
Councillor McGuire?
When we heard tonight that the existing tower is going to be in service till 2026, I think it's okay to defer this. I also would like to know if there's any advantages of completing this study once the tower is empty to get a better picture, or if it matters or not. But yeah, I'm okay for deferring till 2024.
And I'm seeing thumbs up for the deferral, knowing that we've not heard the last of it, but for this year we have. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, to answer Councillor McGuire's question, the visual inspection is done when the tower is out of service and empty. But clearly more study is needed. So thank you for that direction. Under the police budget, we talked about not needing to relocate the communications equipment. So I think there was consensus on this one. The Police Services Board have also agreed with that. That removed 50,000. Library renovations, we had a request from the CEO of the library to add 80,000 to accommodate relocation expenses. So that's been included in this draft. The Confederate Bridge.
Just we do have a question from Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, you're showing 1.287 as revised. That's not actual budget hit, is it? My understanding is they have money in the bank and money that we had put aside previously, correct?
That is correct. And Mr. Dickey, I think, can get that number. I think it was 324,000 plus the 80. So it's approximately 400, but we can confirm that number.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, we all support the library, and the first question that comes to mind is, if the library renovations are going on, how's it going to impact the town square that we're doing, for one thing?
Yeah, so good question. I would say the my understanding of the library renovation is it's primarily internal renovations with some external on the opposite side of the building from the town square. So while we will need to coordinate those activities, my suggestion is town square will be finished by the time the library board finalizes the design, tenders the project, awards the work. I don't think we'll have a contractor conflict on the site, but good question.
Okay, and through the chair, just one more, just to, I mean, I grew up in the library. I love the library, but they have, let's say 900 in the bank or 800, and I'm just not sure what the future of the library is. And we had the presentation from the chief librarian. It was like, you know, it might not be a library in 10 years or 20 years. So I've got a little bit of concern there. I know that council has broad support for this project, and I do too. But to make that investment, I haven't seen a strategic plan or a vision of what the library imagines itself to be. So I'll just put that out there as a bit of a concern for me.
Yeah, and if I may just speak to that, certainly, can we do that in two parts? One is, could you, maybe the treasurer could just tell us, I understand the budget, as Councillor Brennan has rightly pointed out, is 1.28, but so where is that on the revenue side that we would show up with the libraries contributing to that, or why does it show up? Or should there be a footnote down there saying less library contribution, or what's the proper way to display this so that the public understand?
Yeah, to Mr. Chair. Yeah, yes, this schedule, it was just the net change in kind of the funding required. So the original draft from the schedule for it does show the funding of 540,000 that shows as
okay,
would be the donation amount set aside for it.
So thank you, Councillor Brennan, for pointing that out, and it just flagged it for people. Councillor Miller, if I could, one more. I've been fairly quiet tonight. I understand the long-term, I think if you look 10 years from now for municipalities, we don't know the future, let alone, 20 years. So we have an important asset in our community. We need to keep investing in it. And if we get 10 to 15 years life out of it, then I'm all for it. Having said that, I'll turn it over to Councillor Miller.
Well said, Mr. Chair. I was going to say something similar. We own the building, and it's a beautiful building, and we need to maintain it. We need to make the top floor accessible. We need to be concerned about the environmental impacts, the insulation and heating and all of those sorts of things that need to be addressed, not just the aesthetics of the renovation. And so I know I spoke to the library board. I'm the council rep on the library. There is a plan that is in place, but it is very operational in nature. The future of the library certainly is for a broader discussion. And as a municipality, we should either be leading it or taking part in that for sure. But I don't think it's an immediate decision, particularly as this is our property to maintain. So I support the keeping this all in the budget.
Okay, Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I do. I am of the feel that, and I have different thoughts when it comes to a library. Are they really used as much as they used to be? And I guess they are, but the thing of it is, this is our building. It's a historical building. And if we don't maintain it, then what's going to happen to it? And if down the road, 10, 15, 20 years from now, it is no longer a library, well, it could always be something else as long as it's been maintained properly. And so that's my concern. I think we have sort of been dragging our feet on this one for a while, and I think we need to get at it and get it done and finished and get people in there using it, but really maintain this beautiful building. It would be terrible if it got into the state that it had to be tore down. That is just awful. So I think we need to be moving on this. And I do believe that the library has raised quite a bit of money for these renovations, for sure. And they also have a place to move the library to as they do the renovations. Now, that's a big bonus. There's going to be a cost. I believe it's $30,000 for the rental of where they can move to. But that is definitely something that can help move this forward. And I think we need to be moving on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your support. Mayor Panko?
No, for everything that's been said so far, I agree completely. We need to invest in our library, maintain it, and enhance the experience and accessibility for all its users.
Okay. So it looks like support for the way the status quo on that project. Do you want to keep going, CO Morris?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the next item is Confederation Bridge. So following on the heels of the recent decision, we've adjusted the budget, and that decision removed 1.273 million from the first draft.
Okay, Councillor Quinn?
So I'm going to be the odd person here, I guess. Confederation Bridge is not what I was wanting. I was wanting a vehicle bridge, not just a pedestrian bridge. But if this is what we're going to have, this is what we're going to have. Can I ask CEO Morris, though, how much was the pedestrian bridge that's built beside the water treatment plant? How much did that cost? Off the top of your head, do you have any idea?
Yes, excellent question. So it was built probably 5 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago. I believe it was around 200,000, 210,000 rings a bell. I could confirm that figure, but it was around that neighborhood.
So my question then is, let's find a different figure than 1.2 million for this. If we're just going to put in a walking bridge, let's see how creative we can be here and get the cost of it down so we can take some more of that money right out of that budget. So if it was $200,000, why aren't we in that kind of a ballpark?
Director McMahon or CO Morris?
I'll refer this to Mr. McMahon.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Quinn. I just wanted to address your question about looking at different options for the structure. So what we do know is we've completed a municipal class EA. Council gave the decision to issue the notice of study completion. But within that municipal class EA, we did kind of drill down on council's appetite for a cloned version of the bridge that was there. So that's kind of what's driving that preliminary budgeting costs for a cloned look of the structure. Now, keep in mind that, you know, whatever we end up or whatever council decides to put in there is council's prerogative. Council could look to deviate from a cloned look. There are different options out there that are just as visually appealing as trying to clone what was there before. So I would just kind of reiterate that it does open up an opportunity to look at it through a different lens, through different options, different design options that could still be just as visually appealing as what we previously had and still meet the intent to get a heritage look over there. So I just wanted to table that to get the creative juices flowing as we work along with more McIntosh Perry on the design. So there will be different options coming forward, I guess is my point.
Go ahead, Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Director McMahon. I really think that we need to be really trying to get this price down. And the walking bridge at the water treatment plant is a lovely bridge. It's beautiful now that it's been put into place. And I'll likely get hung for this, but anyways, it's all right. I've been threatened before. I had even come to the point where I thought, why are we putting in a bridge? There is a walking area with Parks Canada. So why are we putting in a bridge? Why are we spending that kind of money? And so I'm just throwing that out there, but I'd like to see this cost definitely come way down. Thank you.
Yeah, we're putting that bridge in because council made that decision at a previous meeting. That's why. Does that cost, it's a good point that Councillor Quinn raised about the cost. Does it include the removal of the old bridge in that cost?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so there's going to be a cost to doing that as well. Okay.
Correct.
And so when we get to the design phase, options and prices will come forward at that time.
Yeah, so the genesis of this figure was the municipal class environmental assessment. We added the detailed design and the bridge, the pier and abutment evaluation, the structural evaluation, to arrive at the figure you see in front of us. So we would consider this the top end. And certainly if there are ways to lower that actual cost, we will be examining those.
Okay. So that seems to be fine. Good discussion. Thank you. The next one.
So the next is the Marguerite, Allen and Ross issue, which I think committee discussed at length just a short time ago. So we will change it. We had assumed that the project would be done over 2 years, but we'll change it and defer it to 2024, knowing that we'll proceed with the design work.
Okay.
Okay, so that saves another 200,000. The Air Care Drive roof, we left it in. Council or committee endorsed that at the last meeting. The splash pad in Victoria Park, the direction was to defer it until 2024. So the second draft reflects that direction.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. CAO Morris, I just wanted to clarify, was the direction to defer or was the direction to start the design work and the investigation of what kind of splash pad we wanted this year? I don't want to lose it. And I just wondered how we ended that.
Yeah, so our through the chair, our staff's understanding is that it was felt it would be premature to think we could build whatever water feature we decide is appropriate. So we would take 2023 to work with Parks Canada on their management plan for Victoria Park generally, come up with some ideas and get some ideas flowing before we come back with the 2024 budget with a more refined figure. And so there was discussion about, you know, a more natural looking play feature with logs and some kind of a water feature, but it doesn't have to be a traditional splash pad. So
Okay.
Clearly some more work to be done before we can present you with something you can endorse.
Thank you.
Councillor Quinn.
On that, do we have Parks Canada on our side, or are they going to stop us on this? Are they saying that we can do some of these things in the park, or are they in agreement? I mean, maybe we're just dreaming because they have to give permission, right?
Yeah, so we would, there have been discussions with Parks Canada. So my understanding is that there was alignment with a water feature because the water feature already exists. It's just been domiciled. But I do think it's timely to go back and just kind of check in and we'll have a new director coming forward in community services. So it'll be a good opportunity for that person to re-engage with Parks and just make sure we're aligned on our overall holistic objectives for Victoria Park. So the delay I think is we'll make good use of deferring this until 2024, just to make sure all the partners are aligned.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'll continue on, Mr. Chair. Playground updates, the direction was to retain 150 of the 250,000. So we removed 100,000 for that line item. The electrical modifications to the server room, we're going to defer that. We need to define the scope of that project before we come back with a revised number. There's little risk of deferring that project in our mind. The ball diamond netting was mentioned that it was felt that was a lot of money. So we've incorporated 5,000 in the operating budget to look at parking and sign solutions for that area for 2023. So the savings are 40,000 from capital. The net savings are 35,000 in the total budget. And the last one was simply an item that was missed on the first draft, which was the runway crack sealing, which I think we had consensus to move forward with.
Do you, Mr. Dickey, have you been running the calculator as we did that, or we'll just wait? We don't need to know in real time, but it's getting closer to the goal, I think, than when we started. A lot closer. And we'll see the next draft. So what else do we have on the budget that you wanted feedback on tonight? CO Morse?
Yeah, so I think the decisions, the direction we've received tonight with Marguerite, with the water tower study, the deferrals of the other things, the addition of the bar screen budget, subject to a review. My sense is we're at a point where we can balance this budget. We can achieve your objectives of a 3.28 tax rate increase and the water and sewer rates. My quick calculations in my head is I'm showing about 25,000 roughly that we need to find. My suggestion is that would not be sufficient to warrant borrowing. So my suggestion to you is that we simply draw down the capital reserve 25,000 or whatever that number is, and Mr. Dickey will calculate it further than we expected to originally. So I believe we've achieved a budget that meets your original guidelines that you've given us.
And in essence, with some tweaking, this is the decisions made tonight. The council has done a terrific job. I think we've arrived at a 2023 budget, and we'll wait to see the final document. Am I mistaken in that assumption? Is everybody feeling? Councillor Miller?
Just a special thank you to you, Mr. Chair, for leading us through these conversations with tact and grace and skill. I feel like we've had some difficult conversations, but have landed in a really great place. And thanks to the staff for the guidance. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, that's so. If I'm not suggesting we're ahead of schedule, but if we've reached a point that we're very close with some minor tweaking, as CO Morse talked about with that 25,000, would we adjust that approval schedule going forward? Well, you'll look at that and see if that presents an opportunity. And we also want time to hear back from the public on their thoughts. So if we had something, a draft 3 that's, I guess, the final one, we might be able to advance this sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, we can bring back a third draft reflecting this evening's very clear direction. And again, I think it will achieve your objectives that you set out to achieve. So with that in mind, we could bring that back next Monday to a special committee of the whole. And then give a week to for the public to have a chance to consider that and bring it back for first and second reading on the 20th, I believe, would be the next council meeting. Okay. Is that correct, Nadine?
Actually, it'd be Tuesday, the 21st, following Family Day. But you're correct. The next council meeting would be the 21st.
Okay.
So at that point, council could either give all 3 readings or give first and second if you felt more comfortable, and come back with the third. The one thing I would bring up at this point is that we do have a water billing obligation to get water bills out, and this budget was built on the increases being effective January 1st. So if council is comfortable approving the water and wastewater increases, I would suggest if we can accelerate those, we can not delay water billing, which causes some difficulties for some of our customers. But that's purely it's not necessary, but it would certainly streamline our billing and cash flow issues.
Okay, Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, that won't be the first time we've done that. So that I would be agreeable to that. And also on the passing of the budget, we could pass first and second on whatever date you mentioned, the 21st, and then I would suggest give a 2-week delay for third reading, that would enable, I think that's what's been done in the past, to give public an opportunity to comment and then do the third reading after that.
Yeah, there is a schedule. If we stick to that schedule, it gets us right around the date that Councillor Brennan's suggesting. All right, I was just trying to see, but I see agreement for going ahead with the water, wastewater approvals. So Councillor Quinn, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you. That's a big increase on the water and the wastewater, and I'm not in favor of moving it that fast. I want to hear from the public on this. I want to hear what their thoughts are on those kind of increases, because in my mind, in my heart, I think that's a big increase. And I think a lot of people are having issues. So if it's the water and wastewater is going to be that, then I think the taxes should be much, much less than what they are. So I am not in favor of moving things ahead too fast. I want to hear from the public. I want to hear what their concerns are and thoughts.
Well, we'll have that discussion next week, I guess, on the wastewater and water again, but we've had that one, but we'll have it again. Okay, nothing further. Thank everyone. You've done a terrific job, and staff, terrific reports. Appreciate everyone's work. We're going to move on to the temporary borrowing bylaw. I believe Mr. Dickey is our next one.
Mr. Chair, oh, there he is.
Emeritus Singh?
It's okay. I thought his microphone was stuck. It's okay.
Oh. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, temporary borrowing. I don't really have much to add to the report. This is a standard annual bylaw that's passed in most municipalities. It just gets pre-approval in case there's a short-term need. If bills go out, bills need to be paid before the taxes are collected during the course of the year. It just gives sets a stage if that's needed. It typically isn't, but it's just putting that in place.
Yeah.
I'm happy to take any other questions if there are any.
Standard procedure. Everybody's okay with this? Yes, they are. Thank you. And I think we're down to the fire truck loan renewal report again with Mr. Dickey.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this is a loan, as mentioned in the report, that was taken out 10 years ago for a fire vehicle, and it's a 20-year kind of amortization or 20-year period. The interest was just set for 10 years, so that's come up in February to be renewed for to have interest rate reset. So the bank requires a bylaw to be passed to put into place the renewal agreement. So this report is bringing that information to council to consider for renewing that loan for 10 more years.
Any comments or questions, Mayor Panko?
Trying to get myself off mute there. Thank you, Treasurer Dickey. I guess hesitant to lock into a long-term rate when we're seeing what is, I think, the highest prime rate we've seen in 27 years. And if we look at the trends of where rates have been, what we're experiencing today may get moderately worse, but everything we hear from the central banks and the narrative is that we're probably near the end of this rate increasing cycle. And I'm wondering about even the option of a variable rate at this stage, and ride a variable rate for a couple of years, and rates start to decline, then potentially lock in for the balance of the term at what could end up being a lower rate. I should have asked you this before, because I think you could have got some idea on what a variable rate would be. Variable rate, in all probability, would be higher today, I think, than the fixed rate for the 10-year term. But I think it may give us better value over the long run. My thoughts.
Any comment, Mr. Dickey?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd have to look at our loan agreements. When he came back to renew, he said we could do a 5-year or 10-year. I'm not sure. I have to look at the details to see if a variable is even an option. I'm not sure if it is, but certainly I can double check that. But it could be maybe it is. I haven't read the agreement, so we can certainly do a 5-year as well as another option.
Mr. Chair, if we have time to bring this back next week, with a variable rate or a 1-year rate, just as a couple more options. I'd appreciate that.
And we have time on this renewal?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, the bylaw has to be signed next week, has to be done next Monday night to be to the bank by next Friday. So we do have, the bylaw was good. This was information for the motion to bylaw to come next week anyway. So we could, it gives us time to look at, to see if there's any other options there.
Thank you.
Councillor Robinson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be much more agreeable to lock, if we have to lock in, if we were able to lock in for a lower period of time than 10 years, I'd be much more agreeable to that than maintaining a higher interest rate for 10 when chances are the interest is going to go back down within the 5 years anyway. So that, that's my thought on it.
So some options will come back next week, and if there are any, and we'll make the decision then. I do agree that the governors of the banks do want to see, they are predicting this leveling off, but the term we heard at the Rural Ontario Municipal Association was the world is in a polycrisis. So there's a number of huge crises happening around the world, and the uncertainty. So as much as we want to get inflation under control, there's so many other variables. I'm tempted to lock it in, but we will have this discussion next week. Anything else from anyone? Did I miss anything, Deputy Clerk Bennett? I don't think so. Hearing that, we've got a motion to adjourn, that the committee adjourn its proceedings at 6:57 and stand so adjourned till the next duly called committee meeting. And that's moved by Councillor Brennan and seconded by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Thank you and good night.